You're seeing the video now, right? You see the screen. Yeah. Okay. And can you hear sound?
On 100% voluntary capacity.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. Okay. Good. Then we start now. I let everyone in. You're seeing the video now, right? You see the screen. Yeah. Okay. And can you hear sound?
Very low, rather.
100% voluntary capacity. Welcome to the Our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 7th event of the UNESCO World Heritage and Human Rights Series. This webinar series is part of the Our World Heritage 2021 debates and a global initiative to discuss the challenges of the UNESCO World Heritage Convention on its upcoming 50th anniversary. The webinar series is co-organized with Dr. Claudia Luisa, Rethinking Diplomacy Fellow at the Duke Center for International and Global Studies, and Dr. Lynn Meskel, and Professor of Anthropology and Professor of Historic Preservation in the Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you also to Mikey Houtkoop and to Francesco Banderin and Mike Turner for coordinating this whole platform for us to speak. Today, we will continue to address human rights violations in World Heritage sites. I am Jessica Lawrence. I'm a conservation biologist by training, and I'm a staff scientist at Earth Justice in the international program. Earth Justice is a nonprofit public interest law organization in the United States, and it was one of the first organizations to advocate for the international right of all people to a healthy and sustainable environment, a principle that remains at the heart of our work today. We're also guided by our conviction that environmental harms, including the burdens of the fossil fuel economy, must not continue to fall disproportionately on Indigenous and low-income and communities in the global South. To end the many harms of fossil fuel consumption, we collaborate with partners to catalyze the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy in key places like Australia, Indonesia, Latin America, and South Africa. Together, we oppose fossil fuel production and consumption where those activities cause the greatest harm. They challenge barriers to renewable energy, and they accelerate the global transition to clean energy and increase access to low-cost clean energy for all. I began working on World Heritage advocacy in 2008 when I helped coordinate a petition from Canadian and US conservation organizations regarding the threats of coal mining and gas drilling in the watershed of the Flathead River, which flows into Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. That campaign resulted in a reactive monitoring mission, which recommended adding the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park to the list of World Heritage in danger if the energy projects moved forward. Right after that, Canada canceled the projects and the watershed became permanently protected from mining and drilling. So since 2015, Earth Justice has advised other coalitions in other parts of the world on how to present their issues to the World Heritage Committee, including the Sundarbans of Bangladesh, the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, and several other places. Unfortunately, the Kenyans were not able to join us today, so we're going to move directly to hearing from our Bangladesh colleagues who have amazing experience in advocating for their World Heritage sites before the committee. So first, I'm going to introduce Sharif Jameel. He's an internationally recognized leader and activist in the global environmental and human rights movement. For more than 2 decades, he has been organizing civic action for environmental justice in Bangladesh. He serves as General Secretary of the country's largest civil society platform, Bangladesh Poribash Andolan, or BAPA. He's also the coordinator of Waterkeepers Bangladesh, Buriganga Riverkeeper, and a South Asian regional representative in the Waterkeeper Council of Waterkeeper Alliance. He co-founded National Committee for Saving the Sundarbans, the acronym is NCSS, and served on the fact-finding mission of South Asians for Human Rights on the Rampal Power Plant and the Sundarbans. Along with human rights activist Sultana Kamal, who's also with us today, Mr. Jameel has advocated before the World Heritage Committee since 2017. Sharif, would you like to load up your presentation and speak with us? Thank you so much.
Yes, Jessica. Hello to everyone. And it's evening here. I'm sure Jessica is in the West Coast. Eve's in Europe. So good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. So I can share my screen, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Just a second, let me switch my video. Well, hello to everyone again. I would like to go pretty fast, though we may have a little bit longer than assumed.
Yes, we have more time, so you don't have to rush. Just take your time. Wonderful.
Thank you. So I prepared some slides for everybody to understand what we have been doing and why we are working on this and how important is this in terms of human rights and healthy environment. So the movement to protect the Sundarbans is basically the presentation today I will be going through. So let's check about the Sundarbans. Not necessarily we all know much about the Sundarbans. It's in the coast of the Bay of Bengal, and the Sundarbans is the one World Heritage Site, and that's why we are discussing these things today here and how we got engaged with the United Nations as well. So the Sundarbans is the largest single-tract mangrove forest in the world, and it's in the coast of the Ganges and Brahmaputra Delta. So it's a very unique place in the world. It's a 10,000 square kilometer of mangrove forest, and 60% of this forest is in Bangladesh and 40% is in India. Important thing is that Sundarban is very unique for its unique biodiversity, and it's in Bangladesh part, it has more than 5,000 interlinked canals and rivers. So it's like 1,800 kilometers of waterway inside this forest. Sundarbans is very important for the entire nation because, you know, Bangladesh is a small country in terms of territory, but it's a very densely populated country. We have more than 1,000 people. As an estimate says, it's like more than 1,084 people live in 1 square kilometer of this country. So, and it's a delta country, very fertile and tropical country. But in and around the Sundarbans, we have 3 million people who live basically with the livelihood that is based on the Sundarbans. But Sundarbans is actually protecting the entire country from the extreme weather patterns that are recurrently happening these days due to the climate change and coming from Indian Ocean through Bay of Bengal. When it hits the, if you can see a photograph in the slide, the latest one, the last cyclone years that hit like a month ago, and that actually almost all the cyclones that are coming from Indian Ocean through Bay of Bengal actually first hits the Sundarbans. So Sundarbans actually protects the southern part of the country, and sometimes the cyclones are bigger than the whole country. So it actually protects the entire nation from extreme weather patterns that are recurrently these days coming from the Indian Ocean due to the climate change. And as an environment activist, Sundarbans was very important to us because about 50% of the forest resources of the country are estimated that only the Sundarbans. So Sundarbans as an environment activist was very unique and important for us. There are many other reasons. It's the last habitat of the Bengal tiger. There are exotic species. There are renowned Irrawaddy dolphins are there. It's a complex ecosystem, and it's a natural treasure indeed. So I don't want to waste time with explaining the Sundarbans much, but Sundarbans is a natural wonder, and it's a global asset, and everybody should protect it. So we were trying to protect it as an activist, to protect it from the salinity intrusion that has been happening for the Sundarbans since the Farakka Dam was commissioned by India at the upstream of the Ganges river system. So Sundarbans was degrading in many ways. So we have been working on the Sundarbans to protect it and to protect the whole nation from these natural calamities that I explained. So Sundarbans was on our focus. But when this government took the initiative to develop the country economically and focused on industrialization, government actually came up with some very long-term and visionary plans and activities. And they formed the Special Economy Zones Authority in 2010, and they declared more than 1,000 special economy zones across the country. So the country was also trying to develop other legal frameworks that should support this objective of industrialization. So the power, it's very much essential for industrialization. So power system master plan also came in 2010, and we found that one of the major hubs of that power system master plan targeting to produce electricity about 6,000 megawatt from Rampal hub, which is very close to the Sundarbans vicinity. It's 4 kilometers away from the ecologically critical area and buffer zone of the Sundarbans. We tried to understand more about the coal-based power plants and how it can impact the natural habitat and ecosystem, and how it can be impacting to the Sundarbans. And we came to know in many ways that coal is a dirty fuel, and the equipments and the systems that were been taken place for the Rampal power hub was not state of art equipment. However, coal is a dirty fuel, so coal would be doing harm to the Sundarbans. But as an environment activist, we can do it, we can say it, but we needed to develop the argument, and we needed to know more about the scientific research and study reports. So we engaged and requested globally recognized scientists, and we developed 13 research documents how it can impact to this unique forest ecosystem. And we found it's very detrimental for the Sundarbans ecosystem. So we tried to engage people, and we tried to people know, and we tried to understand how much it is relevant to the people's livelihood who are living on the Sundarbans, and how much it is going to do harm for the ecosystem. And we tried to let United Nations also know, UNESCO to as their custodian for taking care of the outstanding universal value of the Sundarbans. And UNESCO in 2016, actually, first they declared a reactive monitoring mission to the Sundarbans. we actually wrote them many a times. We updated them about their heritage site, and they also were trying to understand what was happening on the ground, and they also sent the mission, but unfortunately they did not able to receive any public comment during their reactive monitoring mission in 2016, which was we think it was incomplete or inadequate then for that reason. However, we tried to be engaged in the Krakow meeting in 2017. I was there physically, and of course, many other activists and organizations who were working on the natural heritage were there. And the Krakow committee meeting came up with some decisions that the state party were supposed to carry forward. But one thing is very important for our realization, which I felt when I first went to Krakow, which is World Heritage Center, when they sent the reactive monitoring mission, that was more like independent and science-based and non-partisan. They tried more to understand the risk factor for the World Heritage Site and how things were moving around in terms of the industrialization and red category industries development there. And that's why the recommendation are rightly saying that the Sundarbans is in danger. So it should be listed as the property in danger. But when the committee meeting happens, naturally, what I wanted to say is we found that state to state has some bilateral relationships, and nations have some geopolitical interest, commercial interest, trade and benefit, and many other things. So it does not always work independently. However, the decisions was considering the importance of the Sundarbans in 2017, but the things were not as it was expected on the ground, that the construction of the coal-based power plant in that close vicinity would be stopped, but that was not the case on ground. Rather, there was another one half very close vicinity to the Sundarbans in Paira started to develop. So Sundarbans currently, and then it was supposed to be like attacked from both the sides, from Paira and Rampal. So the people who were also telling against that development of the coal-based power production was actually also under some propaganda. People were at some extent were hearing that, well, we need coal because we are a poor nation and we need development, which was really not the case. That we tried to project through research documents and other publications. However, here it is very relevant to mention how human rights in the United Nations is very important for activities who wants to protect the planet like us. Because if you see, it was in 31st of July in 2018 when the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Environment in the United Nations, expert John Knox, issued a special statement on the Sundarbans to halt this industrialization that were threatening to the unique treasure. And he needed to write this thing. I quote it down here for you to see. He wrote, "Too often, the people who raise questions about development projects are ignored or even treated as enemies of the state. But really, they should be treated as the champions of sustainable development." We are not expecting to be treated like champions, but we want us to be listened to. I mean, like, if there is any meaningful discussion, we are ready to discuss. We also want development of the economy and the growth of the country, but we want it to be sustainable, and it should not do harm for a large number of population in a country like Bangladesh. When environmental disasters come to Bangladesh, in a place like Bangladesh, it comes for a huge population. So it's a very important issues for us to think about. And then in 2019, Baku session came, and Sajid Bhai also, he is the panelist here and he will be speaking. Sajid Bhai was also there, so there are some experience we had. Still, it's not up to the mark to us, because on ground you see blade like this are cutting the river Pushur, which is the lifeline of this fragile ecosystem. And there are dolphin sanctuaries. There are very aquatic biodiversity that are very interconnected and interlinked. So these kind of blades are dredging the arteries of the Sundarbans every day. So it cannot go on. We want United Nations to be more responsible in terms of their actions, and the committees should also think like that. In 2019, that's why another one reactive monitoring team came, mission team came, and that team actually sat together with the civil society, and you can see the photograph here. But unfortunately, the findings of that reactive monitoring mission is yet remained confidential and gives communities no time to discuss and comment on findings before the committee will issue its Sundarbans decision in just 5 weeks. So it questions it raises many questions. I hope those will be resolved and we could know immediately what the World Heritage Center came up with their recommendations. It should not be a classified document, as they actually set together with the civil society, you can see here. So we want that to be provided immediately. But we, civil society, are not sitting idle. Sundarbans is our protector. If we want to protect ourselves, this nation, and the future generation, we must protect the Sundarbans. So we will be fighting it, and civil society will be raising their questions, even it is harder enough to sound like autocratic behavior or something like that, you can see here. Thank you so much for listening to me. I have crossed the time limit, but as I had some more time, so I think it's okay. Jess, I am happy to get any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to hold off on questions until all three panelists have spoken, but people can feel free to add their questions in the chat at any time and we'll come back to them. Thank you so much, Sharif. That was really interesting. You had so many good insights and recommendations. And now I want to pass it to Dr. Sajid Kamal. He's the author of The Renewable Revolution: How We Can Fight Climate Change, Prevent Energy Wars, Revitalize the Economy, and Transition to a Sustainable Future, from 2011. And speaking of champions of sustainability, he has also written about the Sundarbans in a book called Sundarban: Poems and Photographs of an Enchanting Journey, with an introduction to the ecology of the Sundarbans. And he has been a renewable energy and sustainable development educator internationally for 40 years, setting up projects in the USA, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Armenia, El Salvador, and Zimbabwe. He has taught in the Sustainable International Development Program at Brandeis University for 20 years and served as a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists Speakers Bureau. He has received numerous awards, including Boston Mayor's first annual Green Award for Community Leadership in Energy and Climate Protection, a Lifetime Achievement Award by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the Rachel Carson Award by the Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light. He has also been featured in Boston Sunday Globe magazine as one of 6 local heroes whose work is having rippling effects at home and far away in making the world a better place. Dr. Kamal has advocated before the World Heritage Committee since 2019, as Sharif mentioned. So Dr. Kamal.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So I think it's wonderful. One of the, I think, byproducts of this COVID situation has been that it has brought the world together in some ways without undermining the challenges also it has created. So let's hope that we can, the COVID ends, but this both interest and need for coming together as a world community continues. So I think that Sharif, thank you for your presentation. I think I always learn from when you make a presentation. And I think that there's so much more to be said, as you know as well. We all know. I think only thing that I've also add to that, the impact, I've also been thinking about the impact on Sundarban. And one of the things that I also want to mention is that right now, I think that COVID is really, we haven't seen the end of it yet. And one of the things that we are learning about COVID is that impact on biodiversity can be an important, in fact, it can be a cause for releasing zoonotic diseases, and that can also trigger not just COVID but also other zoonotic diseases. And I think that one of the things that we have to be mindful that impacting the diversity of biodiversity of Sundarban also presents a threat to further release of zoonotic diseases. So that's the impact that I have been thinking about, and I wanted to share that. And then going from there, I think that again, as Sharif also mentioned, that the main reason or an excuse given for Rampal power plant is that we need energy and we need development. And we want to emphasize that, yes, we do want that. In fact, we're very much committed to that, but we want sustainable development. We want development that sustains. We want energy that also is in tune with sustainable development. So we are not at all against either the development or needing the energy that we need to fuel development. So the question becomes is that, what is development and what kind of energy? So to me, thinking about, therefore, what we have to think about is that, all right, if we did not have coal plant, then what would be the solution? First of all, as we know, that coal plant itself is not a solution, but it is at least propaganda as a solution, and it has had some benefits. We don't undermine that. But at the same time, now we know enough about fossil fuel as well as nuclear power to see that it's not something that we want to depend on. We want to move away from those sources. But at the same time, Bangladesh is one of the countries is continuing to insist on that. So therefore, we do want to mention that we have to think about alternative. So that's where I come in with the experience that I have gained and the understanding I have gained, and I'm happy to share that. First of all, the question becomes, all right, if we did not have fossil fuel or nuclear, we have enough energy. Well, I think that to me, I have been involved directly with Bangladesh since 1986, when I was fortunate enough to implement a photovoltaic pilot program for Bangladesh between 1986 and 90. During the 2 years, I've installed 10 photovoltaic systems, and then some solar cookers, and started biogas. And then again, that was a pilot project. And then in future, I served as a consultant to BRAC Solar Energy Program. And through that, we continued with expansion of renewable energy technologies. At the same time, I was also able to introduce micro wind turbines, and we installed 10 micro wind turbines in different parts of Bangladesh. And then I've remained involved with some of these efforts, as well as been with great appreciation seeing what others are doing to make this renewable energy scenario blossom. And right now, an estimate is that there are 6 to 8 million solar installations throughout Bangladesh. And there are also about 71,000 biogas, and there's some solar hot water systems, and there's some solar cookers, and then some micro hydros really that are also being some places tested, and some places are being used regularly. So to me, this is a sort of like a promising scenario. But at the same time, that's not enough. That's not enough simply because Bangladesh potential for renewable energy is practically revolutionary. Why do I say that? Because it's a small country, as we know, but at the same time, the renewable energy sources such as light, heat, wind, water movement, and photosynthesis. I say there's 5 subsystems. Bangladesh is amazingly rich in its combination of these energy sources, which means there's sun, there's wind, and all these things. So, and you have sunny sun practically year round, and you have 100-mile long seashore, and you have hilly areas, and you have gravity-driven waterways. Again, we have to be mindful that any technology, renewable or non-renewable, that we don't disturb the technology, they don't disturb the ecology or harm people. And that's also a question of human rights. And we, and for that, I also always mention that really Kaptai, which is one of the hydro projects we have, is renewable, but it really also displaced 40,000 Chakmas, and I call that a cultural genocide. And I think so we have to be mindful about these concerns. And we have to make sure that whether it's renewable or non-renewable, that we look at them holistically and take all these factors into consideration before advocating for any. So anyway, so having said that Bangladesh has all these subsystems that are really, for which Bangladesh is amazingly rich. And that's why I call that Bangladesh is really practically renewable, in terms of renewable energy, is practically untapped energy mine. And I have had my inquiry and my understanding that not only that these can provide enough energy, more than enough energy that Bangladesh needs, so we don't have to go into fossil nuclear path. But at the same time, it's not just my voice. I think over the years there have been a number of very thorough and very well thought out international studies and reports which have confirmed that. And for that, I just want to mention just a few here for the, okay. The number of studies that have confirmed that are, one is the joint report of the Renewable and Appropriate Energy Laboratory at the University of California, Berkeley, and the International Center for Climate Change and Development in Bangladesh. The second report is the Institute of Energy Economics and Financial Analysis in USA, and the joint report of National Renewable Energy Laboratory that really harness energy, and National Center for Atmospheric Research on the wind energy potential in Bangladesh. So these are done from researchers from outside the country, and within the country also the organization that let's see, let me just to be sure, let me make sure that I quote properly. We know the organization in Bangladesh called the National Committee, which is really, it has a long name. Really, that's a national by Anu Muhammad, the Alternative Power and Energy Plan for Bangladesh, which the National Committee released. It really also shows that Bangladesh has the potential for 100% renewable energy, to go 100%, rely 100% on renewable energy. But the challenge has been that these, I'm not really sure that if enough attention is paid to these studies, and at the same time, the justification for coal plant and now the nuclear power plant continues without any attention to these studies. So anyway, so our commitment is to really, yes, listen to all sides, but let's be objective, let's be scientific, and let's also keep in mind that we all want development, but we want sustainable development, and to do that, we all want energy, and let's use the energy that's appropriate for it. So to me, this is the scenario right now. So question is that what is Bangladesh then doing? And to me, we need to also pay attention to that also. So in that in mind, I've been paying attention to that, what has been Bangladesh's policy and steps toward that direction. Well, I think that as I mentioned, that Bangladesh has this current energy scenario. There are some contributions that Bangladesh government made through some of its agencies, and at the same time, in recent years, in last year, there was a proposal that government made that actually it will move away from coal, because the world is moving away from coal, and partly also the reason is that more and more financiers will not support coal plants, and it is basically obsolete technology. More and more countries are moving away from it, and so Bangladesh is really, again, along with many other countries, are becoming dumping ground for a lot of this technology that other countries are rejecting. Okay, so it was a good sign that Bangladesh also decided that we move away from coal. But at the same time, by moving away from coal, what Bangladesh emphasized, it will use more natural gases. So to me, it becomes really, if the climate change is an issue, then in that case, it becomes choosing one disaster against another, because if we're concerned about climate change and CO2 emission, putting more emphasis on the natural gas is not a solution. So to me, at the same time, this proposal came, and that is welcome. So we have to gear it in the right direction, that which way it goes. Secondly, also that the climate virtual summit that President Joe Biden called, and Prime Minister Hasina presented a demand that that the World Committee should come forward to support Bangladesh in its transition to carbon neutral future. That's well said. Because Bangladesh is not solely responsible for climate change, and the World Committee should come forward. But at the same time, what is true is that I think that demand for such demands have more credibility when Bangladesh, in its own policy and practice, shows that we are committed to that. But at the same time, while the civil society is continuing to emphasize that direction, the government steps in that direction has been at best lukewarm. And an example that if a few years ago, when Bangladesh had a policy to go 20% renewables, really, even that was not met, really. Then it was 10%. And then finally, right now, only 3% of Bangladesh energy is derived from renewable sources. So to me, that's really, in terms of policy and practice, we don't see that. And then recently, there's been Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, which is great. Again, the idea is to move away from carbon neutral technologies. At least that's in terms of the rhetoric of it. That's wonderful. I think that's welcome, really. And then again, Bangladesh recently really sat with Japan, JICA, Japan International Cooperation. So the thing is that, again, because Japan is really committed to helping Bangladesh move away from carbon-intensive technologies, and that is also welcome. So to me, my final words here is to really emphasize once again that yes, these are good steps. At the same time, I think the credibility of it will be when Bangladesh shows that it is committed to really going in the renewable energy direction and toward that future, both in policy and practice, and that is still lacking. And so we have to keep emphasizing the importance of that, and at the same time, we have to be very mindful at that time is of the essence, because the damages that is being done is really very, very critical. I think that, and thanks to Sharif, and thanks to BAPA, and thanks to other organizations who are trying to emphasize this critical issue, really bring this critical issue to the fore, that, we need to also stop the damage that is happening really, because if we don't do that, we will not need for renewable into the future. And so to me, again, to summarize, yes, we are committed to development. We're going to commit development to be sustainable. Yes, we recognize that we need energy. And at the same time, we want to emphasize that what energy should we use. And in this case, what is really very promising and very hopeful that Bangladesh has the potential. And right there, it is practically untapped. And what we need is the political will and commitment, both in public policy and practice. And what I feel very hopeful is that I think that scenario is evolving, and I cannot speak high enough of the civil society, that steps it has been taking, that risks it's been taking. And again, I also echo John Knox's word that they deserve to be looked at as champions of sustainable development, and they are to me, and it's my honor to be working together with them. And I think that at the same time, I feel that it is an area that we don't need to be on this side or the other side. One of the things that we're learning from both climate change and coronavirus, that it doesn't really spare anyone. We all are impacted. There are short-term booms, but the short-term booms, economic booms, are really busts, really. And so to me, going in the direction of with coal and non-renewable nuclear is even with short-term gains, it will long-term economic disasters as well, not just environmental disaster. So it's both, and that is one of the basis of sustainable development, that environmental development and economic development should not be one against the other, they should be together. And that's what we're committed to. And I really appreciate really all of the other people. I see many people here from around the world who are together with us in this effort. And I think that we need the dialogue. We need the dialogue with between civil society and the government and the industry. And we have to realize that this destructiveness is not going to spare anyone. And just as the benefit will also benefit everyone. And I hope that it is the direction of the benefit and sustainability that we can go toward and together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamal. It's always wonderful to listen to your big picture understanding of these issues. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Yves Lador. He is a consultant whose work includes representing Earth Justice at the UN in Geneva since 1991. Mr. Lador's work focuses on norms and mechanisms linking human rights and the environment, the right to a healthy and sustainable environment, right to water and sanitation, human rights and climate change, right not to be exposed to toxic substances and pollution, protection of environmental defenders, procedural environmental rights, and the role of civil society. He has consulted for intergovernmental institutions such as the Council of Europe. I think there's a bit of feedback, so I'm going to, thank you. Okay, sorry. The Office of the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights and the UN Economic Commission for Europe. He was involved in the negotiation of several environmental rights instruments and compliance mechanisms. He regularly conducts studies and training sessions and contributes to the work of civil society organizations. He has published articles on the work of UN bodies on human rights and the environment and on human rights education and training. Mr. Lador holds a degree from the Geneva Graduate Institute of Development Studies and was one of the civil society representatives elected to the Geneva Constitutional Assembly from 2008 to 2012, which drafted the new constitution of the Republic and Canton of Geneva, adopted by a popular vote in 2012. So, welcome, Yves.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. And can you see also my screen? I tried to share it. Is it visible? Yes, great. So Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's quite a privilege to take the floor after my two friends, Sharif and Dr. Kamal. I'm very honored, really, to be able to do that. The work they are doing in trying to save the Sundarbans is just incredible, and it needs a lot of bravery. And I'd really like to underline that, because it's not an easy task at all to do such a work and conduct such a fight. My presentation will be much more focused as a complement to all of the elements that they have presented, and actually which are elements which have been discussed with states, with the Secretariat, with the Center in the framework of the World Heritage Sites. And of course, here we are really focusing for our part on natural sites, and not at all working on the other type of sites like the cultural or immaterial sites or heritage. I'll just like very briefly to come back on the intervention that was presented by Sharif, and also to present some of the rights which are at stake and which were also mentioned by Sharif, but to put them in the context of the human rights institution, and then to see how when we are doing such a work, can we connect with these human rights bodies? So, well, you are now familiar with this map, and this is an interesting picture of the tiger, which is threatens an iconic image of the Sundarban. But we must never forget, and that's something on which Sharif is always very insists always a lot, is the number of people who are living there and whose life depend on the Sundarban ecosystems. You have here a picture you can see again, you saw that already in Sharif's presentation, and that's a point on which I wanted to focus. Sharif has mentioned this intervention that we had requested from the Special Rapporteur, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, Professor John Knox. Actually, it was at the end of his mandate in 2018. Because we were seeing the difficulties to have the decision of the World Heritage Committee being really implemented. And we thought that it was very important that the elements, in particular the elements of participation, be underlined, and perhaps also to see if there is a need or a possibility to mobilize more assistance or resources in order to have what was requested at that time was the environmental impact assessment. And an environmental impact assessment requests public participation. As it was very clearly said here, you just have a quote from this statement from the Special Rapporteur. We continued this work with the successor of the Special Rapporteur. You have here a picture in the Office of the High Commissioner in Geneva of Professor David Boyd, who took over the mandate at the end of the period of Professor John Knox. And he's meeting at that moment with IUCN. He had asked to meet IUCN as a scientific body working on this issue in order to have to be updated on the situation and to see what are the next elements that himself can carry on. Now, to do such a link between the human rights system and the UNESCO World Heritage System, if I can call it like that, might seem, special or not usual, when actually it is perfectly in the framework of the convention. First, if we see Article 5 of the convention, it is clear that the policy that states are supposed to take in order to protect these sites must be in line with the life of the community. It is very clearly stated. But even further, in the operational guidelines on the implementation of the convention, on Article 12, it is clear said that the parties are encouraged to adopt a human rights-based approach. That's absolutely clear. To have participation, and that this participation should be gender balanced and include stakeholders, right holders, indigenous people, and so on, all of the people who are directly concerned by the management and by the protection of these World Heritage properties. So when we did that, we were really in our mind totally in what is needed to be done for the implementation of the convention. So now I'd like to continue, but perhaps just to bring some conclusions or some elements of thoughts out of all our experiences, not only the one on Sundarbans, but also the one we have with Lamu, or for example, with the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and all of the different sites on which we are working and who are protected by the World Heritage Convention. The very first element and the very first right that we see in each of these cases is, of course, the element of information and the element of participation. In many of the cases, and as it was very well quoted by Sharif, quoting precisely Professor John Knox, the participation of the local people is usually missing. There's different ways. Sometimes it's just a token participation. Sometimes it is just ignored. But we see again and again really an issue about the public participation which is needed. Another element is the question of having access to scientific information. That's a very crucial issue, and we see it in all of our cases. First, the convention itself has this great particularity to rely on a number of scientific centers. For the natural sites, it's the IUCN, the World Union for the Conservation of the International Union, sorry, for the Conservation of Nature. And one of the problems we see in the way the World Heritage Committee works is that it does not always put the scientific information at the center of all of its decision. And probably if we want to improve the system, this is something which is crucial. The other type of centers also, of scientific centers, I'm thinking here for the other type of sites, the cultural ones or immaterial properties, they also need to be reinforced, and they also need to be strengthened and scientific hubs. And this is absolutely crucial in the discussion, in the process. It is not possible to continue to have decisions who give the impression that they totally disregard what has been established scientifically concerning the preservation of the sites. So this is something probably that needs to be continued, because it directly has an effect on the fundamental rights of people who are living in or next to these properties, or whose livelihood depends on these different properties. Another element also about the scientific information is that at the local level, and we see it in all of the sites on which we're working, you have local knowledge. You have local traditional information. And this is very often not taken on board in the decision-making process. So again, this element of fundamental rights is absolutely crucial. And another one, finally, is that we do see in some situations, and that's not only for the sites on which we are working, also problematic elements of corruption. And it has to be said very clearly, because you do see that some process, and that's sometimes why the participation is just a token one. It's because you try just to tick the boxes of what is requested, but that's not how the real decision has been taken. And the real decision has been taken in totally obscure ways, and of course, directly impacts negatively the World Heritage Site. So here there is absolutely a crucial element. A second element is that the sites on which we are working, the natural sites for our experience, is that their outstanding universal value, which is at the core of the convention, do contribute to the health, to the life, and to the livelihood of the people who are in the sites or who are around the sites. So there is a very direct link and relationship between all what is needed to preserve these World Heritage properties and the fact that people in that area have a capacity to continue and have the livelihood. And one of the things which is most disturbing is to see how in some situations, there is like a trend to try to put people who are victims or who are living in poverty or who are in difficult situation, being opposed one to each other. For example, when we talk about energy issues, which can affect some areas, one of the first arguments is, and it's a right one, that people are living in poverty and we must help them to get out of poverty. But then when you look at the situation, you see that the properties that should be protected, the people who are living here will lose their livelihood. So basically, it's like making a choice of one type of population against another. This is a total violation of the equality of rights of people within a country. This is a very fundamental element. So it is very important that the right to livelihood, which relates to these properties, is clearly stated and protected, and it is articulated with the way we protect these World Heritage Sites. Finally, another category of rights is, of course, the one to live in a healthy environment, to development, and even to self-determination. It was very well said by Dr. Kamal just before me, how much the question of development is one that everybody cares about. And I think what we just heard from Dr. Kamal leaves just no ambiguity about how committed he is, and how most of the scientific community of the Bangladeshi people is totally committed to the issue of development. All of the community is totally committed to development. So the issue is not to oppose the protection of World Heritage Sites to development issues. It's to discuss what type of development, and is the development done in order for the people who are in the country to live correctly, to have the right to stay in their traditional places, to be able to live in their normal environment, to be able to live in an environment where the ecosystems will preserve, and so it means their own life will be preserved. These are the very fundamental elements that have to be put as a question and should be at the heart of the type of discussions. So these types of discussions can actually be, and that's why I'm formulating them here as right-based approaches, can be very well discussed in the different human rights bodies and mechanisms. Now, let's not forget, as we start on this, that all of the countries who have ratified the World Heritage Convention have also ratified a number, if not most, of the international or universal human rights instruments, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and so on. So you have a combined obligation, and you see very well that the obligations you have in the field of human rights are also some of the obligations that you have in the way you will have to manage and protect these World Heritage properties. So they go together. And this is exactly what the Special Rapporteur on the rights to on human rights and environment, Professor John Knox, did in his statement. But you have other special procedures linked to the Human Rights Council, like the Special Rapporteur on the indigenous peoples, the Special Rapporteur on the rights to culture or to cultural rights, on freedom of expression, on freedom of association. So you have a number of procedures within the Human Rights Council that can monitor situations, that can provide assistance, that can even help and call in order to bring assistance to countries who would need it in order to implement their obligations, and we could call here combined obligation with the human rights instruments and their obligation under the convention, under the World Heritage Convention. Then you have another procedure which can also be very useful. It's the fact that under most of these conventions, I mean, on each of these conventions, you have a treaty body, which is a group of experts who are nominated by the parties of that treaty in order to supervise or to look at how the countries, how each party is implementing the obligation under the convention. And so they have to do regular reports in front of this committee. These meetings are public, the documents are public. And these are excellent moments in order to discuss how, for example, the protection of different sites is effective, how people are able to participate, and how this can contribute to the implementation of the obligation under the Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, just to give an example, or on the rights of women, and so on. So there is here an excellent possibility. It is possible for NGOs, for civil societies, for others, to bring this information to the to these committees, and which are called treaty bodies, and afterwards to participate. There's different procedures to participate for each of the bodies, so I won't get into the details, but you do have this possibility to participate in the discussion. And I think in the coming years, we need more of these discussions that will relate directly to some of the World Heritage Sites. And then you have the Universal Periodic Review. This is a unique mechanism because it's a peer review where each state member of the United Nations, comes every 4.5 or 5 years in front of all of its peers, means all of the other states. And there is a discussion, a 3 hours discussion on what are the challenges this state is facing in order to implement human rights? How does it develop its own policies and so on? And then you have recommendations from the other states in order to improve its own mechanism. Now, all states who have ratified the World Heritage Convention have a common obligation to help the other states to protect these types of properties. So here again, it would be very interesting to see when it is really needed and relevant, to see these discussions also being developed in the framework of the Universal Periodic Review. And so to come to the conclusions, with here an image about and a warm hello to our friends from the Lamu Old Town, who unfortunately were unable to join us today, but with who we also worked closely. The very first thing as a conclusion is that we need to continue to work, and it's really our experience in that, to have a right-based approach to the protection of the World Heritage Sites, to include these different human rights process in the protection mechanisms, in the management mechanisms. It is absolutely crucial in order to reinforce the purpose of the convention. Second, it is striking to see how, in a way, the convention remains for the time being in a silo. And it's quite surprising in a way, because the convention directly relates to huge other issues, like the question of biodiversity. And of course, that's particularly relevant for the natural sites. Same thing for climate change. And the issue and the impact of climate change is not only on natural sites, it also affects, and sometimes very severely, cultural sites. Pollution is another element. So you have a number of other instruments that should be combined in order to protect these sites. So the discussions about the World Heritage Sites should not just remain only limited into this framework of discussion. There should be also connections with the other related elements in order to preserve them. And then finally, what we see from our experience is that these sites are also elements of sustainability. I think the demonstration that was just presented by Dr. Kamal is very clear about that. And one of the elements which is not enough underlined is that, at least for the natural sites, but I'm sure for a number of the cultural sites it will be the same, there are also elements of resilience. And today, resilience is a crucial element for any country when we see what we have to face and the damages, the increasing environmental or climate damages that we have to face. So these sites preserve an identity, preserve knowledge. We see very well with the Sundarbans, they also provide a very, very important resilience for Bangladesh in front of climate change, for the preservation of biodiversity, for the preservation of livelihood. So it's very important that it is now introduced in the discussion, globally speaking, as fundamental element of sustainability. And then in this debate, it would be interesting also that these linkages help to bring more assistance to the states who need it in order to preserve their own environment. Because it is clear that, and if I go back to the example of Bangladesh, Bangladesh does not have the same resources as a number of developed states, and any of other states who are also developing states, but in the same region. So there is a need, just as it has been very correctly said in the World Heritage Convention, there is a need for a common effort in order to preserve these properties. We must not just leave the states who have the responsibility to preserve them just alone to do it. They need the help of the whole community, who should not, and that goes directly for climate change, should not act in a way that will damage these properties, but also bring assistance so that they help properties. And I will finish here with the excellent word of Dr. Kamal, saying that we are all, it's a question for all of us, wherever we live, that all countries are on path for sustainability. And I think we see by these examples how much, by linking it, human rights, these World Heritage Sites, and putting it in a more global framework, we see how these sites are an element to bring us to a stronger sustainability. And so I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eve. That's really, really helpful to understand the urgency of how far the convention needs to move in order to really promote human rights to sustainability, to environmental protection, to climate resilience. So I'm going to open it up to questions. We have one question coming from Dr. S.K. Pouchery in New Delhi to Eve, asking about tourism being affected by the pandemic and the lockdown has led to the loss of livelihood for many at heritage sites. And what is the relief, Mr. Yves Lador?
Okay, well, you want me to answer this directly. I'm afraid that I won't be able to relieve you with my answers, and it's a very, very good one. In the field of human rights, the very first thing we do when we are facing these type of violation is to do the fact-finding and to bring it to the attention of the different bodies. And I would say the very first thing we need to do right now, and the COVID-19 discussion is growing and growing in the different human rights bodies, and particularly with the Human Rights Council, is to bring these elements to the attention of the different bodies. So I think this is something that should come up at the next meeting of the committee of the World Heritage Convention. And it should also come up, and these elements about the different sites should come up to the next meetings of the Human Rights Council. I think it's a very good point. Now, this is not a relief, but it's the first step in order to push to have a stronger relief and to have stronger protections. We need for this information to be on the table.
Thank you. Sharif or Sajid, do you want to comment on livelihood at the heritage sites going forward with the COVID pandemic?
No, one thing is very, very much pertinent to the site we are discussing about, which is Sundarbans. There are a large number of population who are living on fishing across that region. So when the lockdown is there and when the COVID situation is deteriorating, then their livelihood is really at stake. So, of course, yes, the United Nations mechanism or state parties should come forward to discuss about these things, especially because the fishing in that area, that particular heritage area, is not like fishing in other areas. So that have some regulations, some specific timeline of the year, some specific group of community. So it's like differently it should get attention, which is correctly underscored by the question. Thank you.
Dr. Kamal, do you want to comment? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I think, there you go.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I would echo again, the response both Eve and Sharif mentioned. I think that to me, we have to address, some of the contradictions, because one of the things that we talk about in terms of development and energy need is the poverty solution, which Eve also touched really. To me, when we displace all these people, whether they're in fishing or honey collecting, you have small traders, and as Sharif mentioned, there are 3 million people there, and displacing them or disrupting their livelihood is creating poverty. See, so to me, really, we have to acknowledge that there's a contradiction when we say that we want to, create one of the goals of economic development is to eliminate poverty. It should not be making only a handful of people very, very rich and millionaires to billionaires. It should not be at the expense of people. So to me, we have to see that it's equitable, and if equitable development is also really has to be addressed, and equitable development and human rights to that equitability, equality is also human rights. So to me, we have to also break these different aspects together so they're not in contradiction with each other. So again, the point is that it should be holistically addressed rather than reductionistic or lopsided way. So I think that the point is that we have to then think about which way the world is moving right now in terms of revitalizing the economy. Revitalizing the economy, global economy is not going to non-renewables. It's going to renewable, creating new jobs, and there are all new possibilities. And at the same time, you know, economy is also dependent on the quality of the environment. So, you know, only healthy environment can have healthy economy. So that should not be a contradiction. And in this case, the Sundarbans is a prime example of that. You know, that we need to respect the people's rights, their livelihood, right to their livelihoods. We want to maintain the environment, and at the same time, we have solution to the justification or rationalization that are given to really have this coal power impact on the Sundarbans.
Thank you so much. So our colleague from LAMU was actually able to join us just now. They had a problem with internet earlier, but Mohammed Atman is here now, so I'm going to let him speak for a few moments. First, I'm going to introduce him. He is the chair of LAWASCO, the Water Department for Lamu County in Kenya. He is active in the Save Lamu Coalition, where Lamu residents, including fishermen, farmers, artisans, traditional communities, landless peasants, pastoralists, and diverse indigenous groups, including the Bajuni, Orma, Sanye, Awir, and Swahili, are objecting to irresponsible industrialization in the wider setting of Lamu Old Town. And if you don't know, Lamu Old Town is an island off the coast of Kenya that has an incredible history, and it is a cultural site for its architectural heritage, and it's also its cultural heritage of many different traditional, intangible heritages. So Save Lamu is a decade-old coalition of 40 civil society organizations focused on environment, youth, development, women, and welfare. It's composed of community-based indigenous organizations who are or will be affected by LAPSET, which is the large development project for, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, and I'll let Mohammed tell you more about it, but it will set up a city around just north of Lamu Old Town, where a lot of industrialization will take place and a lot of fossil fuel extraction of gas from across Eastern Africa will come through that port. It also includes a plan for a large coal plant, which has been canceled by the High Court of Kenya, but could still be moving forward in the years to come. So the Save Lamu Coalition engages communities and stakeholders to ensure participatory decision-making, achieve sustainable and responsible development, and preserve the environmental, social, and cultural integrity of Lamu. Mr. Atman has advocated before the World Heritage Committee since 2018. Mr. Atman, can you speak with us now?
Yes, hi everyone.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm so happy. First of all, I'm very sorry we took long to join you because of technical problems. But I said, at least even if I get a few minutes, I join you to show the solidarity and that we are on the same boat, sailing to protect and engage all those stakeholders to make sure the indigenous community plus their culture, value, heritage is totally protected and conserved. I've been listening a bit from panelists. I've learned a lot from what I've been hearing from you. It is really adding value to our spirit of protecting the right of our minorities and protection of human rights. As Jessica was explaining earlier, yes, it is very true. Lamu is a World Heritage Site, and we have all these great site for people to see and get us the memories of our memorial time of our fathers. The time immemorial is already still existing here. We have concerns of these major industries coming to Lamu to do the development for the agenda of increasing the GDP of the state. And we've been fighting hard to make sure whatever is happening, it doesn't harm us in reference to our cultural values, cultural diversity, our marine biodiversity and all that. We've been fighting for quite some time, and we've been to court to express our concern, and we even won the two cases, one against the coal power plant construction and another one against this lapsed bigger project, which involves the establishment of a new big airport, the new harbor, the port, the resource city, the railway, the pipeline. Just yesterday, we've been attending the public hearing of feasibility study done by the oil and pipeline company who would want to build this massive oil company in the city of Lamu. So, and it's true, as Jessica said, this is not far from the heritage site. And even according to their environmental impact assessment, element of heritage is not well covered at all. Element of marine biodiversity is not covered at all. And if you stand up to speak out about them, the powerful people in the government try to give you an obstacle not to speak. And it is really, at the moment, damaging. And as I'm telling you now, most of the fishermen are stranded because most of the breeding ground, the fishermen, has been destroyed. So all in all, if we need to have a proper mechanism in place, proper protection, human rights tools in different to heritage and culture need to be in place and needing to be in practice. So as the global sitting of the world, the UN and UNESCO and whatever, must tell the world, must tell this state that whatever they do, protection of our environment, culture, heritage, value, dignity is so much paramount in reference to whatever development they bring in for the sake of just making money. And the problem here, I feel, is when people come to negotiate about this major project, they tend to forget it is through culture, value, heritage, dignity, which brought them to where they are on the table to make a negotiation. So they forget to bring this element on board whenever they want to do this project. So that keeps more disarrays and unprotected value of our people. So I'm very thankful to such kind of event we are doing today. And I like it to continue, and Sevlam is more than ready to cooperate with you whenever there is a need for us to come together and make a prompt decision and make a prompt struggle to protect our great value of the world, great heritage of the world, great culture of the world, Lamu and all this part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I wonder if any of the other panelists would like to ask you any questions, as we don't have any other questions coming in on the chat. Sajid, Sharif, Eve.
Very good to see and know Muhammad Adman Bhai. Yes, and I got to see some of other friends from Lamu in Brazil last year, and they're actually fighting very hard, to protect the Lamu heritage site. But it's also very fragile, and it's also under severe attack of the so-called development initiatives. But I wanted to mention one other thing in 1 minute, Jessica, which is very relevant to the other question that came from our friend regarding livelihood. I want to give two examples how it's very directly related to the management of the Sundarbans World Heritage Site. You know, I was mentioning about the river Poshur, which is basically treated as the lifeline of the Sundarbans. And that river is very, very important in terms of fishing. So a lot of fishermen community are living by the both bank of the river and also at the estuary when they go to the sea for fishing. That also plays a vital role, that river particular. So there is a study done by academics from Khulna University of Science and Technology, and he has been doing this study for a long time. Every year after he does this, like quality checking and testing for the different regions in the ecosystem of the Koshi River. And he found before 2010, there were more than 6,000 fish eggs in 1 liter of water in Koshi River. But after 2017, he found around 116 to 2016 fish eggs in 1 liter water of Koshi River, which we believe is the cumulative impact of the industrialization that triggered based on these coal-based power hubs. When there is power, and of course, some economic zones are declared in and around that area. So industrialization started recklessly. So a lot of barges, ships are coming and going with equipments for installation of the industrial sites, filling up of the floodplains and riverine canals. So that is destroying the entire ecosystem, but at the same time, taking huge amount of people's livelihood. When there is not enough fish in the water, then fishermen are in the first victim. So this is one example of the livelihood that Sundarbans needs to look at. Another one is the other side, where in the Paira hub, we know that in 2017, more than 38,000 metric tons of Hilsha ilish, which is the national fish of this country, that's a migratory fish, come from the sea, and when it was landed to the mainland, that particular area is the largest fish migration hub for Hilsha ilish, where those coal plants are coming up. So that thousands metric tons of ilish has a lot of people's livelihood, which is included the fishermen in the market in Dhaka, in the capital as well. But we are destroying these fish resources, so they will lose their livelihood, but to develop some dirty fuel or red category industries, or the industry which is not sustainable enough. So livelihood is a very big issue, and it is directly impacting the human rights of those population who are directly dependent on the ecosystem of that natural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Please put them in the chat, or I think Francesco, would you like?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. But first of all, Jessica, thank you very much, and really congratulations for organizing this this webinar. I think it was badly needed. We need to focus much more on the issues of human rights and all the things that we discussed. Not only on nature, of course, there are also many other sides, culture and so on. But certainly, what you're doing on natural heritage is really of prime importance. I have a question. Maybe it's really more like a question for everybody, but let me address it to Eva, because it seems the one that has more, the hands on the mechanisms in the UN. We would like really to raise this issue in the World Heritage Convention. It's one of the missions of our World Heritage, and we really want to stop the silence on these issues. There's never been really a discussion on this. I've been around for 20 years in this business, and I can say that I have never seen a real discussion on these issues at the convention. It's something like the convention is like lives in a bubble, as if this thing didn't exist. Is there any mechanism that you can envisage through other parallel system, UN and so on, or more directly addressing the convention, where this issue can really be given the proper status, issue of human rights and in World Heritage management? That's a question. If I'm not sure that there is an answer, but if not, one thing that we could try, Jessica and even friends, let's try to rally together, some ideas, and perhaps not limit ourselves to this webinar, but also really bring the thing to much further, because that's what we're trying to do. We're preparing for 2022, which is the 50th anniversary of the convention, where we want to put a big reform platform on the floor, and of course we may not be listened by the member state, but I think some member states are interested in this kind of thing. If we are more than just one organization, we can rally together many organizations, starting with their justice, which is also has a high credibility in this field. I think we can be more effective. But Eva, what do you think about? What kind of mechanisms can we think of activating, in order to push the member state to have more responsibility on these issues?
Well, I've just mentioned a few in my presentation, and we can go further afterwards more in details for each one of them. But I think there's something that could also be done pretty easily, and that would answer your first question. It's to ask to some of the special procedure to do, let's say, an institutional visit. I mean, procedures usually carry 2 country visits. It's a budgetary issue, of course, and a question also of timing. Let's not forget they're not professionally paid by the UN. They are really totally independent. Just their costs are covered. So they do 2 visits a year in a country. Of course, they can only go to the country accepts they're coming in. But a number of countries have permanent invitations, which means any special rapporteur who wants to visit us can come. That's not all of the countries, unfortunately. It's still not a number as big as we would like it to be. But so in some situations, special procedures are doing visits not of a country, but of an international organization. For example, the International Maritime Organization has been visited currently by the Special Rapporteur on the impact of hazardous substances and wastes on the enjoyment of human rights. That's one example, but we can mention a number. And so that would be a possibility, and we can think even that it could be a joint.
It sounds very, very interesting.
So these are possibilities.
Oh, that looks very interesting. We had, a visit to the World Heritage Convention. It will be quite something, really. Let's talk about it. We're ready to collaborate and contribute and find the ways to do this. It's I think it's more like a way to raise the issue rather than finger point anything. It's really because as you said, even as everybody has said, in fact they don't look at these things. It's and then there is a lot of this kind of collusion system in which the state parties exchange favors and then things are forgotten. We have seen endless cases, and I think it's time to stop this thing. It's actually one of the very purpose of our organization. When we say stop politicization, which maybe the term is not very good, but that's what we mean, stop that kind of process.
The only point I wanted to add is that, of course, it has to be agreed by, the special procedure as they're independent. We can invite them to do, and then they have to take.
Yeah, of course.
If they don't, then we have no ways to.
No, we can try. We can try.
But there are other possibilities to think. Yes, no, there are avenues possible.
Okay, I look forward to continue this conversation and try to find a way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to ask the other panelists if they'd like to comment on Francesco's question. Sajid, Sharif, Mohammed.
Well, my answer may not be very diplomatic because I'm an activist. What I feel I felt like I should say, which is, it's a question of the credibility of the UN frameworks, like how United Nations World Heritage Committee is working on. As for example, it's a question of transparency. When they are not disclosing their draft report with the parties they did consultation with. This is not acceptable even for a formal meeting here or everywhere. So that's not a thing that should be working like that in a United Nations framework. There should be transparency mechanism and accountability how the United Nations organizations are being functioned. So that is one thing. Second thing is, particularly for this natural heritage site that we were discussing about, which is the Sundarbans. Sundarbans is shared by 2 countries, you heard it, India and Bangladesh. And the power plant we have been discussing is a joint venture from India. And the other hub, which was Spira, is basically mostly collaborated with Chinese investments. So why not? There are clauses in the convention, so far I know, maybe 6.3 or something, that other nations cannot even do anything that can do harm to the outstanding universal values of the heritage property. So why not United Nations will ask India or China not to harm the World Heritage Site they are custodian of? They can also inspire or encourage them for sustainable investment for a nation like us. China is investing 100% renewable in Morocco, and they're investing most of the investment in Bangladesh in coal. That's not justifiable. So I think United Nations frameworks should not be limited to a narrow window of reactive monitoring mission and how the committee works. As I wanted to mention, committee members may have many other equations, like state to state have relationship, commercial relationship, trading relationship, geopolitical relationship. So there should be a mechanism that will ensure the credibility of World Heritage Center and their activities itself. That can come with policy reformation and procedure reformation, but I think time has arrived. We should discuss about this in the United Nations frameworks. The China session is coming forward, and if Sundarban is in danger, not only in danger, it's already degrading, and they are not doing anything that requires it to be taken care by. From the point of United Nations World Heritage Center perspective. So I think the forthcoming days will discuss about these things, and this is not merely an issue for Bangladesh, I suppose, because other World Heritage sites are there in the world who are really in danger, and there needs to be looked at from equitable and justice and non-partisan point of view from the United Nations perspective. I hope it makes some sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Sharif just said, that Article 6.3 of the convention says that no state party should harm the World Heritage Site of another country, of another state party, and yet the committee almost never addresses that fact. They never comment, even in the reactive monitoring mission reports, the draft decisions, there's almost never a condemnation of other countries' involvements, their investments that are directly impacting a World Heritage Site in another country. And both for Sundarbans and Lamu campaigns, they've been asking the committee, why don't you comment on the fact that China or in India are moving forward these mega industries in our place? And it's really the UNESCO is the perfect platform to comment on that under the convention, and yet there's no comment. So there are mechanisms in the convention that aren't being used. There's also a lack of other mechanisms, especially around public participation, that we really need to see changed if we're going to actually make any difference in this system. I see a very long comment come in, so I'm going to read it while I let Sharif talk. Go ahead.
There's one important thing, which is United Nations World Heritage Committee came up with a decision that was prevailed both in 2017 and 2019 decision, which is the state party should ensure the strategic environmental assessment for the southwestern region of the country, including the Sundarbans, before they head forward with any construction of large-scale infrastructure, which is good. We appreciate it. But two things. The United Nations should monitor whether the state party is moving ahead with the construction or not of the large-scale infrastructures. They requested the state party not to go forward without an SEA. Secondly, when the state party is working on the SEA or developing the SEA report, they should also ensure that the SEA is credible enough to be accepted by the concerned community and stakeholders. They didn't even consult with us yet in the process of SEA. But we heard that the SEA process is at the second or third phase of the last stage. So the credibility of SEA is directly interlinked with the credibility of the United Nations, because they asked the state party to do that, and that's why the state party is accomplishing it. So it's not like you do something and you just go away. United Nations is some body which will be always with the state parties with their own credibility and acceptance. That does matter for the entire universe. I think it also very important to be discussed here because the SEA is going on right now, which I wanted to mention. But for us, we want the strategic environment assessment for the entire southern part of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eve has a comment and we're really at time, so I'm not going to be able to address the comment in the chat, which is about FPIC and Indigenous rights participation, but we did have some discussion around Indigenous rights and participation, which obviously is very relative to Nepal. But Eve, please go ahead.
Well, I'll be very brief, but when we talk about the UN, we'll have to be very clear and distinguish what is, the policies which remain in the hands of the states. And so when we talk about the committee is a committee made of states. So it's just state policies and politics, as it was very well said before. And then you have other mechanisms within the UN which are independent or have more independence. And that's where, for example, the World Heritage Convention has these three organisms, which are the scientific bodies preparing the decisions. And I think here there's a lot to be reinforced because it's a real strength, because it puts the reality on the table. And the documents usually are pretty good. So we have to think first how this still needs to be strengthened. How can this be strengthened? And then how do you give it more weight in the decision-making process? Because they are independent. And of course, how also they are more involved perhaps in the participatory process, but it's already a requisite over there. So we always have to distinguish when we talk about the UN, what is done in a more independent bodies. And for example, the special rapporteurs are independent. So they speak because they have a mandate from the UN, but they don't speak just making policy. They do look for the fact. They do fact-finding missions. They do specific recommendations. And that is different from the other bodies which are made of states and where they always have to negotiate everything among themselves. That's what the UN is about. So we always have to make this distinction. And an element, for example, which were just brought in the chat about Nepal, definitely needs to be taken up. I'm thinking about the special rapporteur on the indigenous people and so on, so that at least they are not ignored. And so that we can also use them, because afterwards you have sometimes bouncing effects and information brought to the Human Rights Council, then it's taken up by another body who didn't really notice it, or is called to take it up and then bring some assistance and so on. So there's different type of using the existing mechanisms. So we always have to make these distinctions in the way we develop our strategies.
Thank you so much. And we are at time. So I'm going to thank all of the panelists and thank everyone who's attended and encourage you to join the next Our World Heritage session, which is on World Heritage, Human Rights and Participation, which is obviously very relevant to everything we discussed today. So please do join that next session and we can continue this discussion going forward. Thank you so much to everyone. Take care.
Thank you, just and all.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All in favor? Bye.